Hey everybody, welcome back to the Chapple Show. Remember, if you're new here, hit that subscribe button. Anyways, the first thing I want to talk about today is actually net neutrality. Yes, this is a thing again, and yes, I'm actually going to talk about it for the first time. So anyways, what is net neutrality and why is it in the news? Why is it important to you? Net neutrality is this thing where it allows the open access of internet to all people equally. And so why is this in the news again today? Well, it's because FCC chairman, who is Ajit Pai, I hope I'm getting that name right, is actively seeking to repeal the current rules in place to protect net neutrality. Now, what most people don't know is that a vote actually went through to repeal net neutrality in May. Okay, so what does this actually mean to you, and what does this mean for the average consumer? Well, it pretty much means that the internet and how you purchase the internet, how you access websites, could potentially turn into something similar to TV. So, for example, if you want to access YouTube, oh, we have a nice internet package for that. Oh, you want to access Google? You have to get this internet package. Or maybe you get charged a lot more for accessing those websites. Oh, you want to access Netflix? Well, that's going to be an extra $10. And you know what? We'll even throw in foxnews.com and TMZ with that package. So pretty much that's what it could potentially turn into. And there's also another scenario where internet service providers like AT&T, Verizon, Comcast, they will actually be able to charge more if you want faster access to certain sites. So it's essentially creating a way for large corporations that can afford very large internet packages. They will get the fastest internet. Meanwhile, the average consumer like myself will not be able to access the internet as fast as those guys. And if you guys have been watching this channel for a long time, you guys know that I don't really like to get into that politics or any sort of protests or anything like that, but I think this one is super important to me, at least, because, well, I access the internet every day. So do you guys. If you watch my videos every single day, you guys it should be just as important to you guys as it is to me. And so actually, there was a protest yesterday, the Day of Action for Net Neutrality that happened yesterday, where people sent in over 10 million comments and emails to the FCC. And it wasn't just average consumers that jumped in on this protest against repealing net neutrality. It was also big companies like Facebook, Google, Amazon. You know, a bunch of giant companies joined in on this. And so I think that you guys should too, and I'm going to as well. So you can go to a site like battleforthenet.com or go to, your local representative or your state representative and email them, call them, do whatever you can to at least voice your opinion, have your voice heard that you want a free and open internet. Anyways, the next and final vote for that actually takes place in August, so just be prepared for that. Get all of your votes and have your voice heard up until then, and hopefully we can stop this from happening. On to a little bit of a funny business story here is that there was this man in Texas that went up to an ATM and he was withdrawing some cash, and instead of actually getting, $20 bills, what he got was this note here. It said, "Please help, I'm stuck in here and I don't have my phone. Please call my boss at this phone number." In my very first reaction, if I was in that situation, was like, okay, this is definitely a prank, right? Or someone's trying to trick me, or someone's trying to take my money or something like that. But this was actually a true thing that happened. Someone actually called the police, and the police thought it was a joke. The police thought they were on TV as well, until they heard someone screaming through the ATM saying, try to help me out here, try to get me out of here. And now what actually ended up happening was this guy was servicing the ATM. And for those of you that don't know, there's actually a very small room behind the ATM, which is how people put the money in and how you actually get your money and how you deliver checks. It goes into this small room, and the guy actually got stuck in there and left his keys outside. Now, luckily, when the police heard the voices coming from the ATM, they were able to kick down the service door that is behind the ATM and get the guy out. I couldn't find how long he was actually in there for. But by the way, that's actually a really scary event. Imagine being locked in a service ATM room where no one knows that you're there, and you could have been in there for 6 hours, 12 hours, 24 hours. Who knows how much light's in there? That would have been a pretty scary situation, but luckily no one got hurt. Now let's move on to some more businessy type news here. So I'm going to talk about this because I wasn't here yesterday. I didn't get to talk about it. So for the first time in 7 years, the Bank of Canada, which is essentially the Federal Reserve, but for Canada, they raised their interest rates from 0.5% to 0.75%. So this is the first interest rate hike in 7 years. So what does this mean for the Canadian economy? Well, it just pretty much means the same thing when interest rates go up in the United States. It just means that the perceived strength of the economy is greater than it was in the past 7 years. That's all this really means. But what it means for the average person is that variable interest rates on student loans, mortgages, and so on, they're going to go up just a little bit. So hopefully you locked in your interest rates before this change happened, so you can save a little bit of money every single month. And just one more quick thing I want to mention about this story is that the Canadian dollar right now is worth 78 cents of an American dollar, which is very close to its 2-year high. And keep in mind that last year, after the oil started tanking in Canada, the Canadian dollar was worth 66 cents of an American dollar. So the Canadian dollar has definitely rebounded, and finally we've seen interest rates go up as a signal of a good Canadian economy. And the next thing I want to talk about is actually Tesla's SUV Model Y factory. So for those of you that don't know, it's come out that Tesla's been saying, like, we are bursting at the seams. We need a new factory so that we can make our new cars. And so what does Elon Musk do? What does Tesla do? Well, instead of setting up their factory just wherever they want to, what he actually does is he holds an auction for certain states and certain cities so that he can get the biggest tax break he can for setting up his power plant there. Why do states want to do this? Well, it's because wherever they set up a power plant, we're talking thousands of jobs will certainly flood into the area and give a giant boost to the economy. That is the theory behind it. However, this does come at a fairly giant cost because last time he set up a factory, last time Elon Musk held an auction for a factory, he demanded that the state of Nevada give him $500 million in cash plus $1.4 billion in tax incentives. Essentially, what this meant for Elon Musk is he's getting a $500 million payday, plus the company wouldn't really have to pay too much in tax, which is very significant because USA has the highest corporate tax rate in the entire world at roughly 35%. And so that's how the Gigafactory was actually born, and that's why it's in Nevada of all places. Elon Musk didn't really care. He just needed a little bit of sunlight to get it set up. He didn't really care what state it was. It was the state that was willing to give him the best deal now. And so he's having the same auction again with this Model Y factory. Now, allegedly, he wants a similar deal to the last one he got. We're talking hundreds of millions in cash plus over $1 billion in tax incentives to set up there. And the states that are willing to bid on this is all allegedly, are New Mexico, Texas, and Arizona, because they're the people that lost the bid for the last Elon Musk factory. You know, I was actually thinking about this recently. Like, imagine building a company that is so big and so influential that states and even countries are willing to compete for your business, giving you billions of dollars in tax incentives just so you can set up your office in a certain place. Anyways, no official word yet on where he's going to set up the plant, but I'll keep you guys posted as always. Another story that I want to touch on just briefly is one that has to do with the 2 largest fantasy sports websites in the entire United States in FanDuel and DraftKings. So they have been trying to do a merger essentially for the past year, and it's been a very long and tough process because the FTC does not want this merger to go through, and they probably aren't going to let this go through actually. So they said that it would threaten competition and consumers. These are 2 very giant websites that essentially own the entire fantasy sports business in the United States. And because of this, some of the top executives at FanDuel and DraftKings have essentially just said, look, the merger's not going to go through. We're going to go our separate ways, and we are going to stop this potentially multi-billion-dollar deal. In my opinion on this is I completely understand why the FTC did this. I mean, imagine 2 of the largest businesses in any sort of other sector. Let's just even say the phone sector or the tech sector. So it's like, what if Apple wanted to merge with Samsung? Obviously, there's no chance in hell that would ever go through because it's like the 2 largest companies in their field are merging, and that would just create a monopoly. It's not good for business, not good for the economy. So I completely understand why this got blocked between FanDuel and DraftKings. The next topic I want to touch on just briefly and update you guys on is the Trump tax reform. So the specific area I want to touch on this time is actually the corporate tax holidays that I've been talking about for so long. For all of you new viewers out there, part of the proposed tax reform is that each company, each giant corporation that holds their profits overseas will get a one-time tax holiday to bring all of their corporate money back to the United States. Meaning that all of that money that is held overseas, instead of getting taxed at 35% like it normally would in the United States, they would get a one-time tax benefit of, 5 to 10%. So they would only get taxed at like 5 to 10 to 15% if they were to bring that money back. And this could be absolutely massive regarding tax revenue brought into the United States, because it's estimated that there is $2.5 trillion in corporate profits that are overseas that should be brought back to the United States. Meaning meaning that potentially hundreds of billions of dollars in tax revenue can be collected, plus a lot of that money, a lot of the profits could be pumped in to the American economy again. So that all sounds really good, right? However, there was a report that came out saying that up to 57% of that money that comes back from overseas could simply just go towards corporate debt and nothing else. Meaning that corporations would just use that money to pay off all of their American debt. Actually, there's $13.7 trillion in American corporate debt right now. Meaning that all of that non-taxable profits, that 90% that isn't collected by the United States government, that may not be going back to the United States economy. That could just be going towards paying off debt, or it could just be going to the shareholders, going towards profits, going towards people that aren't the average consumer, not the average American middle-class worker, and that could cause a little bit of a problem for the economy. And now moving on to something that seems to just be a daily topic every single time I make one of these business news videos, is that a giant retailer in the United States has declared bankruptcy, and this time it is Gymboree. So they have announced that they are closing 350 stores, or essentially 30% of their bricks and mortar locations will be closing down. And so the president and CEO of the company, named Daniel Grismer, said, "Today's announcement represents the next step in the company's court-supervised financial restructuring as we work to more strongly position the business for long-term growth and success." You know, one of my favorite things about seeing these retailers close down, by the way, I don't like seeing all of these giant retailers go bankrupt, but one of my favorite things from actually seeing them is that the CEO always comes out with these statements trying to put a positive spin about how the company's losing money hand over fist. And it's like every single time, like, yes, this Chapter 11 bankruptcy, it only means that we are just going through a little bit of a downturn here. We're going to restructure and come back twice as strong. And that's probably not going to be the case for like at least 90% of the people, of the retailers that actually go bankrupt here. So another moment of silence for another retailer going bankrupt. And oh boy, Amazon is just killing everything right now. And you know what? Speaking of giant retailers going bankrupt, we're going to talk a little bit about abandoned malls. Like all of these giant retailers are going bankrupt. We're seeing Sears, you know, Gymboree is the last one going bankrupt. So what's going to happen to these abandoned malls? Well, most people think that they're actually going to get turned into some sort of e-commerce warehouse for a company like Amazon. They could also get turned into giant gyms like Good Life Fitness or LA Fitness, or they could also get turned into medical centers. Like we have these medical plazas right now where I live, where, you know, giant retailers, they moved out and a bunch of medical people, medical professionals moved in. However, we have a new entry into this field, and that is actually drone racing arenas. That is right, the Drone Racing League has actually been picking up a lot of steam recently, and it's gotten to the point now where they're actually going international, and there's $100,000 in prizes for just racing your drones. And they are currently converting a bunch of old retail locations, a bunch of old abandoned malls and stadiums. They're converting them actually into drone racing arenas. I saw some video clips of it recently, and it looks really, really cool, so I recommend you guys check that out. But that's something quite funny, a new purpose for those abandoned malls. I mean, imagine the 30 years ago, imagine all of those Sears and all those giant retailers like Macy's. What if you said to people back then, these are one day going to be drone racing arenas? I mean, kind of crazy how far technology has come and how much business has changed. In other big business news, actually, PayPal has partnered with Apple. This is actually really, really giant news because you can now use PayPal to pay for Apple products, to use in the App Store, to use in the iTunes Store. And so this means giant news for both companies. One is that Apple doesn't have to handle all of the merchant purchases, plus it may actually get some new customers that only want to use e-commerce and buy their stuff through PayPal. And PayPal also gets obviously a giant bonus because they will pick up a 1.25% transaction fee on all purchases that are done through PayPal, I guess through Apple. It's estimated that this will bring in an additional $166 million in revenue for PayPal, and it's shown in the stock price. Actually, the stock shot up in the past couple days, roughly 6% since this announcement, and PayPal as a stock as a whole has actually gone up 36% since April. And my thoughts on this are actually, people don't really realize how much PayPal has expanded in the past year alone. I mean, PayPal has actually been a company, I mean, that was Elon Musk and Peter Thiel's, breakthrough. That was the company that they essentially started and merged together in, I think, 1998, 1999. And just in the past year alone, I mean, my websites, for the first time, I'm able to use PayPal for the first time. That announcement just happened, I believe, 2 weeks ago. And we're seeing them branch out now into companies like Apple and giant websites that host millions of e-commerce stores. They're branching out into those fields now. So there's very good reason to believe that PayPal's revenue will grow into the future. And this is just another good thing for PayPal. So the next news story I want to talk about, which I've actually talked about a few times in the last few weeks, is that is Amazon too big? This has been hitting the mainstream news just very recently. It seems that every single week Amazon is announcing some giant new business venture that they want to get into. So whether it's Whole Foods, whether it's the takeover of the Dish Network, it's, whether it's Amazon Wardrobe, they just want to branch out into a bunch of different industries and just see how it goes and potentially take over that entire industry. Well, there actually may be some pushback from the FTC. Because as we all know, Amazon is one of the giant reasons why a bunch of bricks and mortar businesses are, well, they're essentially going out of business. And that's really bad for the economy because all of those bricks and mortar jobs, all of those 15, 20, 40 people that are used to run that store, they're only going to maybe 5 or 10 jobs at Amazon. Plus, if Amazon becomes successful enough in each one of those branches that they are venturing into, they're essentially creating a giant monopoly where they own a bunch of giant sectors of business. And obviously that's not good. The FTC doesn't want a giant monopoly essentially running the US economy. And so a hedge fund manager named Douglas Cass actually said that there have been government talks about antitrust violations against Amazon. Actually, for those of you that don't know, Amazon had one of their Tokyo offices raided because there was suspicion that there were some antitrust violations going on. Now, Amazon has passed all of these violations so far. They've not had any violations. They've passed everything with flying colors. But it does bring up the question, I mean, I've talked about this so much in the past few weeks. Is Amazon getting too big? And if these ventures are to become successful, is it worth the FTC and the government stepping in saying, hey, you cannot branch out this much. You cannot expand so much because you need to leave some competition for all of the smaller players in this game so that you don't just have a monopoly over everything that on the e-commerce world in the United States. Anyways, let's finish off this video with the stock market winners and losers. So who are the winners today? Well, actually, strangely enough, it was retail, and this is like the first time where all of the retailers had a really good day today. And this was largely because Target announced that it will have higher earnings than expected. So Target was up 4.8% today. So inadvertently, other companies like Kohl's was up 4.79% today. Macy's was up 4.1% today. The Gap was up 5.61% today. So does this mean that retailers are going to have super amazing business over the next 5 years? I would say probably not. I think that retail is still in large amounts of trouble, and just one earnings announcement isn't really going to change this. But I'm super happy. Hopefully this gives a little bit of a buffer to those giant companies because I want retailers and bricks and mortar businesses to obviously stay in business. They employ a lot of people. They're very good for the economy. And so I hope that they do well. I hope that they all just don't go the way of the dinosaur at the same time. I think that would be very bad for the economy. Hopefully days like this happen more often, and it gives them a little bit of a buffer towards potentially either restructuring into a different business or, to eventually going bankrupt. And the only real stock market loser of today was actually Advanced Micro Devices, and there was no real good reason behind this. I mean, Advanced Micro Devices has been one of the most volatile stocks, going giantly up and giantly down over the past, 3 months or so. So they were down 5.32% today. But, based on the stock's recent history over the past month, 3 months or so, they're probably going to rebound. So anyways, I'd like to thank you very much for watching. Leave a comment. What did you think of me actually making a style of video like this? Hopefully you guys liked it. I put in a little bit more effort into it. Hopefully you guys appreciate it. Make sure to check out my stock market program in the link below if you want to see my portfolio, what I'm investing in, and so on. So I'd like to thank you very much for watching. You're all very beautiful people, and I'll see you guys in the next video.